Welcome back here at our studio, the final part of the European Industry and Energy Summit, our 2020 edition. This is our second edition and our first digital one. Let's see what 2021 will bring. But before we're going to talk about next year, let's have the last discussion, the last conversation here at the table. And with a few guests, we're going to call in here into the studio. We're going to talk about system integration. And maybe this is the most important part of the whole program, because everything comes together in this last part of the show. I've got two guests on the table. Let's start with you, David. Very nice to have you here again as my table member. You represent the voice of the audience.
Yes.
So if you're watching us live, please send in all your questions, all your comments, all your compliments, all your replies. You can use the chat function below in the screen. And David van Baarle, he's reading everything. And the best questions, the best responses, he will give here to the table.
Yeah, please join us.
All right, and on my other hand, we have a guest who was already in our program, in the program before, but also you were yesterday with me at the Kromhout Hall in Amsterdam at the first day of the summit. Julius Smit from Ørsted. We see, you're proud in front of you. How tall is this windmill in real life?
Well, that's a tricky question, but it depends on what year they're installed, of course. But they can go up. I would say about let's say 200 meters.
It's higher than the Eiffel Tower.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really impressive. And this one is just, what is it, 20 centimeters?
Well, this is a very old one actually. I think this probably would be around 3.8 megawatts. I would guess if we look at the newest generation, we're now ordering about 14 megawatt sizes. And the first offshore windmill that we ever installed was 0.5.
Wow.
So I think this is probably also a very nice link to the hydrogen and to the electrification of the industry. I think scaling is the buzzword. We heard it several times already.
It's true. And you proved it with your case. You started in the beginning of the 90s with the first offshore wind park in Denmark, and now you're world market leader, also building a lot of wind farms here in the Netherlands offshore, and a lot of new projects coming up. It's about system integration. Of course, we need green energy, so you're a key player. David, you're a key player because you're, as I mentioned, are the voice of the audience, but we also have three other guests, and I will introduce them to you now. Gukske Mette, she is from the Stockholm Environment Institute. We will talk later to her about decarbonization, the cement and steel industry. We've got Farouk Davis from TNO for an overview perspective. And I would like to start with Jackie de Letter. She's from Yara.
Sorry.
Welcome with us here on stage. And yeah, there you are. Okay. Jackie, welcome over here from Yara. You're joining us. Where are you at this moment?
I'm in the guest room of my house because we have to work from home due to the COVID. But I'm located in Belgium and living near to Antwerp.
Yeah, you're living next to Antwerp. Well, of course, we know Yara. So it's one of the major players. You're also based in the southern part of the Netherlands at Zeeland. And you have an interesting collaboration together with Ørsted. Ulysses here at the table. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, I think it had been announced 1.5 months ago. Mm-hmm. I think... as Yara, we have done great efforts to reduce our global warming gases out emissions by first focusing on the laughing gas part. We more or less finished with that, or heading to the max. And on Monday, we also announced that although we reduced almost 50% our greenhouse gases, we want to reach or reduce another 30%, and then we are entering into the reduction of CO2 emissions from our ammonia process. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, which are I think one of the biggest hydrogen producers globally, together with the refineries. And then we end up in the water electrolysis, and of course, to do that climate friendly and without emission of CO2, we need green power, and I think that's a logical step to work together with a green energy company.
Perfect, because then you can go from green to blue, from gray to green to blue to green hydrogen. Julius, of course, they need green energy. You provide those green energy. Already earlier in the show, you mentioned this is the most cost-effective, the cheapest way of energy available at this moment on Earth. Who had thought that 30 years ago?
Yes, well, maybe not on Earth, but
at least
I think
in our
if we
region,
look at the Dutch society, we're actually a quite energy-intensive society in the Netherlands. Of course, due to our history with gas and so on. And if we look at the electricity production, if you want electricity at this scale, offshore wind is one of the cheapest solutions. Of course, solar and onshore wind can probably compete. Onshore is definitely, but also it's also a matter of scale, because in industry it's about gigawatts and it's not about megawatts. I think the North Sea is one of the cheapest in the world for offshore wind. But
because it's relatively easy to build wind farms there. It's not very deep at most places. It's really good reachable.
The soil is quite stable. It's not too deep indeed. It's not far away from the load centers. I think in the Netherlands we see that most of the load centers are in the harbors, of course. The only challenge we have is of course the variability. And that's where we have to go from being used to having base load to what we call embrace nature, maybe, where you have peaks and you have valleys. And obviously we're not asking Jackie to switch on and off the ammonia plant when there's wind or not.
Because then there's no business model, no business case.
No, exactly. But on the North Sea there's almost always wind. But it's not, and so it's on average you could say it's about 5,000 full load hours for a wind turbine, but it's not on and off. So it's always on a little bit. So if you have a lot of windmills, there's always or almost always electricity from offshore wind. And then the only question is who would put down so many windmills that if there is wind, there's too much electricity, and I think that's the idea of the peaks. I think in the Netherlands we have a perfect situation that we know how to evaluate the peaks of offshore wind.
Okay, then Jackie, back to you. This collaboration together with Yara and Ørsted, how does such a thing work? Did you just grab the phone and call Julius and his colleagues, or?
I think, of course, there are many events around renewable energy. So, and you often meet the same people. So I think it's a small world, but I think we have to work together because although it's one of the cheapest ways of electricity, it's still more expensive, significantly more expensive than the grey alternative, and especially with ammonia, easy to be transported. You compete on a global market, so you have to work together and integrate through the value chain to lower the cost and as much as possible, and to work together on what's needed to kick this off, because hydrogen for mobility or ammonia for shipping or all those things, they might come, and probably they will come, but it takes time. And to build something today which is competitive, you need scale, and then you're competing in the conventional industries. That's where, and we can work. We have to work together, and we need support. We need support as well from government. But at least that also such a facility will be also competitive in 10 years from now, when we know that projects will be cheaper and hopefully renewables will be cheaper. But you still have to be competitive.
And because of the scale up, everything will be cheaper. You can be more competitive with other existing technologies. Let's go to Farouk Dervis. Farouk is based at TNO, doing good afternoon. Farouk, you're doing a lot of research also on this topic. How can you help? This is because the Ørsted-Yara combination is a really great example of system integration. How can you help lift things like that?
Well, we are working on a lot of those cooperations, of course. Often they are innovation projects. So also in this case, scaling up electrolyzers, of course, is an important element also in bringing down this cost of green ammonia production, as Jackie mentioned. So it's about the whole chain. We've had a lot of attention, I think, also in the subsidy schemes to bring down the cost of wind energy. So the Dutch SDE scheme, which is basically a feed-in tariff that went to a lot of offshore wind developments. And I think now maybe if you look at the funding schemes, it would be a good idea to also look more on the side of the industry. So how to develop and scale up all kinds of electrification technologies. And of course, the role of hydrogen is always crucial in that. So we are working on a lot of elements in the hydrogen value chain. Of course, production, so electrolysis. We have a facility called the Faraday Lab, where together with manufacturers, we try to bring down the costs, basically, of electrolyzers, also by trying to find substitutes for very expensive and scarce metals that go into them, but also the design of stacks. How to combine them in gigawatt scale, but also in other parts of the value chain. So how do you use gas infrastructure for hydrogen, and also how do you incorporate how do you manufacture chemicals with hydrogen? So you're talking about CCU, utilization of carbon together with hydrogen. So a lot of places in the value chain where we are active.
Basically on all the places in the value chain, I guess. So a lot of research has been done, and TNO is of course supporting that with all those partners. That is your ecosystem, and therefore it's really valuable to also the other parties here and in the studio to the Ørsted-Yara combination, for example. Let's go quickly to David. David, is there an interesting question from one of our audience members?
So I think the audience is a bit, well, they are online, but they're not asking questions. But I have a question maybe for Jackie and maybe for you as well. There's much rumor about ammonia, and it's one of the biggest players. But not only for fertilizers, but also as a transport fuel. So could it be that Yara once in a lifetime could step into the fuel market, maybe? Or other markets than fertilizers?
I can answer. I think we had there was a big announcement last Monday, where besides Sluiskil, we also made the announcement of fully electrifying ammonia, the plans of fully electrifying one in Norway. And that is with the aim for ammonia for shipping fuel. And although there is a lot of ammonia being produced globally, I think 90% of the ammonia is captive use, so used on the site where it's produced. And from the 10%, I think Yara is one of the biggest traders and shippers. We have about 25 or 30% of that market. So ammonia as an energy carrier, to bring it from long distance, and we believe it's it's more efficient to transform it to ammonia than shipping liquid hydrogen. We are interested and following it to play a role in that game as ammonia, because we have infrastructure in terminals and in ships. So when the market kicks off, we have taken the entry hurdle for a big extent. So we are very interested in that area. Will we go down completely to hydrogen for fuel or whatever? I think that's another discussion.
That's maybe one step too far from now.
Yeah, and okay, that's the same discussion, okay, as together with Ørsted, the system integration. Who knows how far we get?
Okay, and Jackie, another topic which we discussed yesterday is, of course, the Rotterdam and Antwerp area, the ARA area, is really highly connected at this moment. What do you think of ideas which are really developed in a late phase at this moment about pipelines between Rotterdam and Antwerp for hydrogen? And then, of course, with a stop at Sluiskil.
We are supporting very much the hydrogen backbone, because if you look to Sluiskil, we do the project together with Ørsted in Sluiskil, but there is no 380 kV cable in Zeeuws-Vlaanderen, where I'm originally from, so I know the area quite well. Yeah. Most of the offshore wind is landing on the other side of the River Scheldt. Yeah. Which means to fully electrify a plant like Sluiskil, you need about 3 gigawatt of electricity.
That's a very thick cable. You need
and it's not a straightforward cable if you have to cross the River Scheldt. And in that respect, okay, we can do this step. We can perhaps do a next step. That at a certain moment we probably also rely upon other locations of hydrogen production and bringing and transporting it to Sluiskil by the hydrogen backbone.
Okay.
The second part is because on one side you have the intermittency of the wind. On the other side, the bigger ammonia production is also a capital-intensive process. So the lower the utilization degree, the higher the cost per ton gets. And using a backbone, including hydrogen storage in caverns, can of course limit the downturns. Not exclude, but limit to a certain extent.
Understood. Julia Smith.
Yeah, I think we're fully aligned on this,
yeah.
and of course there's also clear plans from the ministry. Even last Friday, the North Sea Energy Outlook was
the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Where they see a clear 3-phase approach. So the first phase is the 500 megawatt target of electrolysis in 25, which are on sites, just like together with Yara. Where you have the opportunity to scale the supply chain. The next phase is the 3 to 4 gigawatt target that's there for the 2030 goal, and that needs to be almost centralized locations where you need the backbone, and you need the storage connected to the backbone in order to transform the intermittent profile that's generated from offshore wind into the baseload profile of hydrogen that Yara needs. And then the last, and that's more the outlook for the far future, it's the offshore and international backbone and offshore hydrogen production. Yeah. But the first 2 phases are very real and very integrated in the plans of the Ministry of Economic Affairs.
It's really great. So in the next few years, next couple of years, we will see the results of those plans.
We hope, because there's of course the next step, and I think that's also one of the challenges that we face is that of course these targets also need mechanisms in order to make them real. And the ministry is working hard on creating these instruments that will make these targets possible.
Yeah, you mentioned some price mechanisms, for example, to close the business case, for example,
Exactly.
subsidizing one part. All right, we're going to discuss another topic. That's also because of the time, and let's bring another guest to our virtual table, Gutje Mette from the Stockholm Environment Institute. Gutje, welcome here at our studio. We're here broadcasting live from the harbor of Rotterdam. We are in the Botlek area, surrounded by industry. We see the energy transition taking place around us. You're doing a lot of fundamental research. Also, I mentioned it in the introduction earlier. Also on decarbonizing the cement and steel industry. In Sweden, we know you are a bit ahead of us in decarbonizing that. Can you respond to the things we already discussed here at the table and tell us something about the things you're doing over there?
Thank you, and very pleased to join you. So at SEI, Stockholm Environment Institute, we bring together science and policy, and that's the bridge we form. And my main responsibilities are with an initiative called the Leadership Group for the Industry Transition. That is an initiative joint initiative of India and Sweden, where we bring together 13 countries from Europe and abroad, including Australia, Korea, of course, India, and 15 companies from heavy industries, including aviation, but also cement, steel, agriculture, heavy-duty transport, and other heavy industries. And within that, we work towards building momentum for technologies to reach a tipping point to deliver an industry transition and towards 2050, of course. Hydrogen is a topic that is relevant. Of course, we're in Sweden. Hybrid doesn't need more publicity. You must have all heard about it. It's a big initiative for us, of course, but also the LEADED group helps by bringing these diverse companies and countries together. It helps us discuss different policy experimentation options for decarbonization. Some of them were raised, and I'll touch upon them, but also for technology transfer. Hydrogen is being discussed, and different countries, of course, have different views of it, and definitions are still not yet set. What is green? How we define green? I suppose ThyssenKrupp and hybrid would have different definitions, or what is blue? These are still issues that are being discussed. So we facilitate these dialogues. Of course, its role in the industry as an enabler of system integration is well acknowledged. Hybrid is building currently a large hydrogen storage system with a promise of not only providing storage for hybrid, but also for balancing the electricity system, which is also key. But also we have to be aware of the energy use needed to put these innovative hydrogen projects and decarbonization projects in place. So when we look at green steel and green cement, and these are already energy intensive sectors, as we discussed today here, we really need really large scale availability of green energy as well as hydrogen. And within the roundtables, we hear that it's not happening because we have a curtailment issue, and hydrogen should again form that bridge. But we have questions around unbundling. We have questions around also repurposing of infrastructure. And I'm afraid I'm going to raise more questions than answers, but I'd like to also note that there's an important issue around where do you locate this hydrogen plants? Do you build steel plants integrated? Do you build cement plants integrated? Do these plants, these new plants, do they own the hydrogen, or do they import it? Do we really need to repurpose the pipelines? These are still questions that need answering. And then we also need to see about demand. So clearly heavy industry is a lead market for future hydrogen production, but then we also have questions around how do you enable these large-scale investments? Do you form long-term contracts, or how do they comply with EU laws on competition and so on? So that being said, of course, we also need to, when we're talking about system integration, we also need to look at circularity, recycling, energy efficiency. And that's why it forms a good platform, because we also have Vattenfall, so energy companies within the dialogue. So we need to have a collaboration between energy and heavy industry sector participants for technology transfer, but also building momentum and making sure that we demonstrate that the business case is there. And within that, we call on governments to carry out policy experimentation. And one measure that is currently being discussed by a number of leaded members, such as Germany, is as an incentive scheme, is a carbon contracts for difference scheme. And that is gaining a lot of attention. And countries are now looking into sharing lessons learned. And of course, one size does not fit all. What we may benefit from is roadmaps. So at least in this part of the world, in G20, in OECD countries, we see that the decarbonization is driven by roadmaps. So the governments set the scene and tell where they want to lead, and companies follow. We see a different trend in other countries, in India or other countries, that is driven by industry. So that industry government trust building is also very important, and we track the process. And now I actually want to ask a few questions to the participants of this panel,
All right.
and perhaps also help responding them. But the question I have is, where do you locate plants? How do you form this long-term contracts to make sure that you have a viable business case? I'm also curious about ammonia distance. So like, when does it make actually economic sense? At what distance transporting hydrogen in the form of ammonia?
Yeah.
And also curious about the Danish decision of phasing out oil and gas. So perhaps we can see what that will perhaps lead to more demand for hydrogen in that context. So a question for everybody, so that we maybe have a little bit more discussion from my side.
All right, thank you. Thank you for your for what you said, and also, of course, for your questions. Well, I look around to our panel. Of course, two other panelists are joining us at the virtual table. Right next to me is Julius Smith from Ørsted. The first question is about, well, how you look at plans at developing new sites. Maybe, yes. Well, of course, you collaborate in a lot of these.
I mean,
things.
I think we have a fantastic position in the Netherlands if we compare it with the countries around us with regard to hydrogen. So about phasing out oil and gas. In the Netherlands, we're phasing out our local gas grid, basically, which we can transform into a national backbone, which is a fantastic asset for this. The other thing is we have...
sorry to interrupt, but is this really so easily done? Because because it's easier said than done, isn't it? Because we have a great grid right now, and can we just pump the gas out and pump the hydrogen in, and then...
We have a lot of experts as Gasunie, and if Gasunie says that it's possible,
then
I think we should
we
ask them.
We should do so. All right.
But where do you land it? And I think that's also an interesting question, because I think if we look at the countries around us, we have the advantage of the energy-intensive industry being at the coast.
Yeah.
So it means we can have offshore cables landing at the coast and convert it at that site. So especially Zeeland and also Rotterdam are the main clusters for hydrogen in the Netherlands, and they're located by the coast, and the offshore wind farms are nearby.
So it's really very efficient.
And then the last thing, I think we learned a lot from the programmatic approach that was done for offshore wind. So there were yearly tenders, and each year the cap was lower, and you had to compete on euros per megawatt hour. And if we managed to do and implement such a mechanism for hydrogen as well, with the yearly tenders to provide certainty for the industry, for the supply chain, and with clear price cuts every year and a competition on the price, we're confident that we can get at one point. We will get at merchant prices. We will get at the prices that are grey prices. But of course, it only starts when we start. So if we start now, we will go and do this. We don't know how much it takes, maybe 10, maybe 20 years to get at that point. But if we wait 10 years, it means the end point will also have shifted 10 years.
Yeah.
Because all the technology, all the knowledge, everything is there. It's just waiting for scale and industrialization.
It's waiting to be implemented. You're talking a lot about scale. Guske just also said that. Let's go to back to Jackie de Letter. He's currently in Belgium. Jackie, can you also respond? But a lot of questions are being asked to you and your colleague panel members. Let's elaborate on what Julius just told us, that the situation in the Netherlands is actually optimal for heavy industry with a high energy demand, and for the transition to hydrogen, because we have the North Sea and we can harvest a lot of green power there, and then we bring it to land, and right there, when the cable comes to land, there we can make the hydrogen at Sluiskil, for example, and of course also here in Rotterdam. Can you continue on that?
Well, I think I fully agree with Julius. And if you look to, I'm not the expert of natural gas pipelines and converting them to hydrogen, but if you look to the plans of the TSOs for Europe to build up a hydrogen backbone, you see that the Netherlands is one of the first, because, and perhaps a part of North Germany, because we had the advantage that we had the low caloric gas of Groningen, and which will phase out. And we, next to it or parallel to it, the Netherlands invested in a high caloric gas roundabout as well, which will remain. So it can be easily. I think most quick if you can reuse natural gas pipelines, which they are suited, the compressor stations not, but are suited, then it can go very quick, and then you have more or less as the Netherlands as a starting point of a roundabout where you can go into Europe. Because I think for me the best use is still if you can directly use electricity, you should do it, because it's the most efficient way. But in the Europe, we have built a gas network to transport gas in from outside Europe or produced at the boundaries of Europe, like in the Netherlands or the UK, and transport it inland Europe or from Russia. We have never done that with electricity. So the infrastructure is not there, and then hydrogen with the existing pipelines converting is a very good starting point to convert it at the coast areas, and then where the renewables land, and then put it into a pipeline and transport it to the consumers.
All right. All right, thank you very much. We're going to continue on this. If you're watching us right now, this is a live broadcast from the Plant 1 factory here in Rotterdam, and this is almost the closing ceremony. We will be closing this summit in 10 minutes. So if you want to join us with your questions and comments, please do so. Fill out the chat form right below this stream. This is the last talk show of the second edition of the European Industry and Energy Summit. We're talking about system integration, and Gutske and Mette from the SEI just talked about the integration with all the parties needed. And I was thinking about all those research institutes, which of course the Stockholm Environment Institute is one of them. But we also have a great institute in the Netherlands, and of course that's TNO. And from TNO is Farouk Dervish. Farouk, are you partnering up with the Swedes in doing research? Because, well, we can learn a lot of them. Of course, they have a whole different energy mix than we have in the Netherlands. Because maybe, well, our point of view is we get the energy from the sea. Sweden is, of course, a different country with different possibilities. But do you partner up with Gutske and her team?
Yeah, so in general, I think a lot of these topics are international. So there's no hydrogen just in the Netherlands. That's impossible, and I think it's very common for us to team up as research organizations within Europe. And that goes from the Fraunhofer, Jülich in Germany to SINTEF in Norway, and also institutes in Sweden and everywhere else, basically. So it's quite common to reach out to each other. So work a lot together in all kinds of European projects.
But do you have an example from where you work together? I know in the academic world you work on different projects with different partners. What Gutske is doing with SABB, you are doing in the Netherlands with Tata Steel to make the steel green, for example.
So there are many examples. When you talk about hydrogen infrastructure, of course, the High 3 project with Germany, German research institutes together. But there's also a lot going on in the trilateral, so in the ARA region.
Yeah.
Of course, that's Belgium, the western part of Germany, and the Netherlands. We're also teaming up there to of course, make an efficient infrastructure that is for all these clusters.
Okay. Well, thank you. Gutske, Mette, we get back to you in a minute, but first a round of questions. Final round of questions for you as a viewer. Please send them in. David van Baarle, Editor-in-Chief of Industry Links. You're the voice of the audience. What do they want to know?
Well, Monica van Leeuwen wants to know, can hydrogen from gasification, from waste, from industry, households, or even forestry, help the system integration, as it can be economically compensate the intermittent nature of renewable electricity.
Okay, so then you make hydrogen out of biomass? Is that
hydrogen out of biomass? So we get a negative. You can
negative
CO2
with
CCS.
Okay, Gutske, let's ask you that, because what we know in Sweden, when you talk about sustainable forest management and using biomass as a really complementary source, that's what you're doing in Sweden, aren't you?
Yes, bioeconomy plays an important role, and it is absolutely viable pathway. I guess a lot more is happening in Denmark, but I should also probably clarify that at SEI we do focus more, at least within my unit, more on socio-technical aspects of the energy transition and industrial transition than technological aspects. Let's put it that way. We're more technological agnostic. So I think perhaps Farouk would be in a better position to answer on more technical side of and feasibility.
Okay, thank you, Farouk. Please, one or two sentences, a short answer, please, to continue on that. Farouk.
Yeah, so you can make hydrogen out of biomass. That's a strictly acceptable route. Through gasification, you can also use waste, household waste.
Yeah, but is it necessary?
Is it necessary? Yeah. Well, I think it will be necessary. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
To make this transition. All right.
Yeah. Electricity is going to be scarce.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
we have to at the previous show we decided that we have to keep all the options at the table that in order to make this transition happen to make the industry green and to make the energy transition really happening, to make the move to hydrogen. We have to keep all the options at the table. So that's what we're doing then here at these summits. Julius, to end, yeah?
I was triggered a bit by Farouk here, who says electricity is scarce. I think it's a choice that we make, because actually the Dutch North Sea, and it's also launched in a report last Friday, which was made by DNV. We can provide all the energy we want for the Netherlands with the Dutch North Sea, with offshore wind. So it's a decision we have to make, whether we make electricity scarce or not. That's system integration, of course. It's making these decisions.
Depending on the room?
Well, I think it's a chicken and egg problem, because you can create a lot of electricity supply, but if there's an oversupply, then your business case for your offshore wind farm is not too positive.
Yeah.
So it's we see that if you want to integrate these two, so industry and energy, you need to add demand, and it needs to go hand in hand. You need
mutual dependency.
Yeah, so that you never have an overproduction of electricity, but that still the produced electricity is green and sustainable, and the prices remain low because there is just enough.
Exactly.
But when you see that via electrification, the demand will rise rapidly, so you will build all those wind farms, and all the energy will go to the industry to make their production green.
Yes, and I think now we're at the stage that we see it's probably, we don't want to subsidize more supply, but it makes sense to sort of kickstart the demand. And of course, there's where the question lies at this point in time.
Yep.
Will we make this decision to kickstart this demand? And in any scale up, the challenge is the first part. It's investments. It's going to cost money, and that's a societal cost that we want to invest or not.
It's the cost of us all.
Matter of choice.
The billions of the Dutch taxpayers go to Danish companies like Ørsted, and then we make the transition happen. That's basically the summarize of it. Or is that too bold to say?
It's a very bold statement, and of course I will not say yes. But it's no, because it's not only Danish companies making offshore wind. I think we have a great example of Dutch companies making offshore wind. And I'm quite sure that these statements that I make are quite in the same line as how they.
Of course they are, and luckily it's a competitive market, and therefore, it's also your urge to make those things better and better again, and it goes for the Dutch players and all the other wind builders in the world. And so we're going to wrap this discussion now. This discussion here. I'm going to thank all the members, all the panelists who joined us. Gutske Mette from Stockholm, Julius Smith here at the table, Jackie de Letter from Belgium, and Farouk Dervis from TNO, based in the Netherlands. I think because he was yesterday in Amsterdam, so he is just around the corner, I guess. And if you are watching us, please keep on watching, because we're going to the closing ceremony of the European Industry and Energy Summit. Bye, and see you next year. Thank you.
Take care.